Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I've learned as I've grown into the person that I am today. And so this video is kind of happening in a strange way. I have my meditations picked out that I wanted to read for today. One from yesterday, that's in the Journey to the Heart book, and one from the book of positive quotations. I may do a second video today on here, I don't know, I haven't decided. But you guys responded so positively to me saying I wanted to do stories on this channel that I was kind of walking around, I was uploading a video for another channel, and I thought, why don't I just sit down and tell some kind of random story? Whatever comes to my head, why don't I tell it? My idea had been to sit down and actually kind of like write down some stories that I wanted to tell, and then come on here and tell those stories. One of the things that's difficult about that is, for those of you that don't watch my vlog, I have been working on a book of stories about my life from when I was growing up, and it's a book called I'm Still That Kid. And it goes back to when I was very, very young until about middle school. And it's a lot of different stories, you know, and it's stories about my mother's alcoholism, it's stories about my parents, it's stories about me and how I didn't feel like I fit in. It's happy stories, funny stories, endearing stories. It's all kinds of stories. And it's, you know, very much told, I would say, in the same vein as like David Sedaris or Augustin Burroughs. You know, it's a mix of humor and sadness. And I think really in life that is life, is this kind of bittersweet quality to the world, you know, that life is bitter and life is sweet, and it's kind of all about the middle of it, you know. And so I've been working on that, and I don't want to tell stories in my videos that I'm going to write about in the book, which is hard because on my vlog I've told like so many stories about my entire life. So I was kind of thinking about different things that had happened to me, and there might be some overlap. Some stories might end up in my book that I also make videos about, and I don't care, you know. They'll probably be told a little bit different. I was talking to my friend Tanya about this the other day, and she had said something about it in a vlog that we had done, and then she said it to, we were talking about it again, and she said, you know, like, every time you retell a story, it's always a little bit different. Like, there's some study out there about that. And so, you know, I'm sure there are things I'll remember, things that are different, you know, if I ever write the stories that I talk about on here. But I've already picked the stories that are going into that book, so I'm going to try not to overlap on this channel. But anyway, I was like walking into the kitchen and I was thinking to myself, you know, like I want to tell a story that just kind of comes like out of the blue. Like, what's something that I, you know, haven't thought about in a long time? And I don't know why. The first story that came to me was this thing that happened to me. I can't remember the exact age that I was, but it was after my parents were separated. My parents got separated when I was between 5 and 6. And then they got divorced when I was like 9 or 10. My dad says 10, but I think it was actually before that. And so it was somewhere in between them because they were separated, but I remember my dad coming over and handling the situation with my mother. And that's part of the lesson. Like, I'm not going to tell any stories on this channel that don't have some kind of teaching moment to them or lesson to learn, because I believe in my life that if I can share the stories that I've gone through as teaching experiences to other people, to even just one person can say, okay, I learned something from this, or maybe this will help me. You know, my parents, just to give a little bit of a background story, they were very, very much in love when they were together. Both parents say that, but at some point it became toxic for them, and the passion went away, and they really disliked each other. I would say that over time, way into my 20s even, my parents never really, really liked each other, but they very, very much respected each other. And I can't, probably from each parent, only once or twice, think about a time that they said something negative about the other parent to me, but even then, it was not harsh whatsoever, you know? I walked in on my parents I was talking to my mom, and I walked in on my mom having a conversation with my dad on the phone, and they were kind of fighting, and I looked at her and I said, do you know what it feels like to be the product of so much anger? If you do not believe that your kids are affected by you fighting, they are. If you do not believe that your kids feel the weight of you talking negatively about your ex, they do. And, you know, one of the things, I had a friend of mine that, you know, I would say this to, and she's much different today, and, you know, but she would say things to me like, I really want my kids, and her kids were young, she would say, I really want my kids to know, like, you know, that about this about their dad or that about their dad. And I'm like, that's not your place to teach them that. You want your kids to love him, you know? And I'm not talking about abusive, really unhealthy situations. I'm talking about just run-of-the-mill divorces or breakups, right? And I think a lot of times we put our own bitterness and our own, you know, especially if that person goes on to marry somebody else or whatever, like we're hurt. We have a lot of hurt feelings about that, right? And I look back on my mom, who, you know, my dad married very, you know, pretty quickly after he got divorced to somebody that was 20 years younger than him. And, you know, my mom felt like she couldn't compete. And they were going on, and we were going on as a family unit, these fantastic trips around the world, you know, and my mom just sat at home and got to be the mom. And I remember sometimes, like, the only issue she really had with my dad was that there were times when, like, I would go over to my dad's house and he would say, do you have homework or work, you know, paper to do this weekend? And I would say, oh no, I got it all done in school. And he would say, are you sure? And I would say, yeah. And then he would take me home Sunday afternoon, and I would come home and I'd be like panicked. Like, I have to do this, I have to do that, even though I was never real focused on homework, right? And my mom would say, see, I'm tired of this. I'm tired that your dad gets to be the fun dad on the weekends, and then when you come home to me on Sunday night, I have to be the disciplinarian mom and make sure that you're sitting at the kitchen table doing your homework. And so then my parents started talking a lot more, and that actually led to them talking more about my homework. One of the things I feel very, very blessed about is because my mom and my dad sometimes couldn't talk because my mom had a lot of emotions attached to my dad that she never really felt threatened by my stepmom after, let's say, 4 or 5 years. Like, at first, she felt like, I can't compete with this. You know, she isn't me. Like, my mom was 5 foot. My stepmom is like, she's like 5'11", you know, and it just, like, she felt like she can't compete with this, right? One of the most fantastic things, on a side note, that ever happened to me is my stepmother said to me one time, I don't know why this gets me emotional when I tell this story, but I just think it's such a great learning lesson. My mother had a lot of friends of hers who would go through divorces, and they would get, the ex would get remarried, and then the new wife would kind of want to play mom, if that makes sense. And, you know, my mom would say, you know, they sat in the front row at graduation, and it was very much like the Stella moment, if you ever saw the movie Stella, where those parents kind of, like, the stepmother kind of took the role of the mother, even though there was still a mother that existed. My stepmother never did that. She never tried to step on my mom's toes. She never spoke poorly of my mom. You know, she just was always, and has always been very gracious of my mother. In fact, I told a story in my vlog not too long ago where my stepmother was actually the one that got my mom to go into the hospital the last time. They were never great friends, but I think they respected each other. And my stepmom said to me one time, she said, I will never be your mother and I will never be your friend, but we can have a relationship that is unique to just us, that nobody else can have. And, you know, I think about that in retrospect because my stepmom would talk to me about things that, like, I couldn't talk to my dad about. Or she would say, like, I would ask for something and she'd say, today's not the day to go to your dad and talk to him about that. Like, you know, like, why don't you wait till Saturday? He's had a rough week, you know, or something like that. When I got older and we were talking about picking me up from school and things like that, my mom and my stepmom were the ones that coordinated that, you know, because, like, a lot of times my dad and my mom just couldn't talk because there was a lot of anger there. But they always parented on the same page, whether it was me going to counseling appointments or it was, you know, choir concerts or orchestra concerts back when I played in orchestra, or, you know, whatever it was, my parents always co-parented together. There was this thing that happened when I was in the winter of about my 8th or 9th year, when all of the kids in our neighborhood, there was a house that was being built. So the street that I grew up on, I actually did a whole vlog showing the house that I grew up on, and I drove down the street. And it's funny because my neighbor to the left, she still lives in the house. So the woman and her husband, but he's passed away since, but she still lives in the house. Her daughter when she went through divorce, bought the house across the street, right? So I'm going down the street in the vlog. It's hilarious, right? And I'm filming it. And the daughter, who was, like, let's say probably 5 or 6 years my senior when I was growing up, she stopped me in the vlog and she's like, sir, can I ask you, like, why you're filming me? And I tell her who I am. And she's like, oh my God. So anyway, it was really cool and I got to talk to her and stuff. But I showed that in a vlog. I showed the street that I grew up in. All the kids were really close in the street, and it was kind of a range of kids that I would say from, like, let's say 5 to, like, 14 that hung out. Like, it was all of us together, and we would play baseball in the cul-de-sac, and I've told those stories, and, you know, we would, you know, just listen, hang out and get into trouble, but not really. At that age, we weren't really getting into horrible trouble. Well, the house that I'm talking about actually is where it happened, and not my house, but the house next door. So the houses on the street were custom built. So it would take like a year for them to be built. And this house had been, like, being built and being built and being built. Well, it was almost finished. It was the middle of winter. And we somehow found a way, all of us, to get into this house, right? So we're now in this unfinished house that's pretty spectacular, right? And we're wanting to just have some fun. And we decided that, I don't know who it was, but probably somebody in the middle of all that age group, decided that we were going to have a kind of, like, housewarming party to ourselves, right? So we're, like, climbing through the windows and stuff. Now, I'm at the time, like, 8 or 9. Well, everybody decides that we're like gonna drink and we're gonna smoke cigarettes and all this kind of stuff in the house and nobody will catch us. And there's probably, I would say, like 7 or 8 of us that are doing this. And everybody's like, well, where are we going to get the beer? Where are we going to get the cigarettes and all this kind of stuff? And one other person on the street got alcohol from their parent, but I got beer of my mother's and I got cigarettes of my mother's, and I brought them. Well, needless to say, it's like rainstorming that night. All of our parents are like, where are they? It's like 10 o'clock at night. They can't find us. So they all figure out that we're in this house because you can see the lights on, right? So we all get busted. Everybody in the world on the street, everybody in the street is in like severe trouble, right? Now, in this situation, you know, I think any parent would see their kid in this and be like, oh, what did they do? I don't know. I can't speak for their parents, but I can only speak for mine, okay? My parents knew that I had a part in this. My parents knew that I had brought my mom's cigarettes. My parents knew that I had brought my mom's beer, and the reason that they knew was that every kid on the street blamed it on me. And this has kind of been a story of my life, and I never really stand up for myself. You know, I've played doormat a lot in my life, and, you know, sometimes looking back, I really don't care. I'm like, you know what? Because the reality is I had a part in that too. I didn't know that at 8 or 9, but today, looking back on that, I had a part in that too. I did bring the beer. I did bring the cigarettes. The fact that all the other kids in the street blamed it on me was absolute BS, but I did learn a very valuable lesson over it. So I remember sitting down and we were in the entryway of my house and my mom was like panicked. She's like, all the parents are going to come for me because, you know, at this time, if it was, let's say 1980, there weren't a lot of single mothers around our area. I mean, almost none. There weren't a lot of parents that had been divorced. And it was something that my mom really struggled with. You know, she really saw it as a failure. She really saw the people looking down on her as being a single mom. And the fact that her child in this neighborhood of all 2-parent families, you know, was the one that brought the alcohol and the cigarettes to this party. She was so afraid of how that would look to her as a mom. And so my mom is standing behind me, okay? And she's like kind of going off. And then I'm sitting on the stairs and I'm crying my eyes out and I'm really, really upset about this whole situation. And I remember my dad, we had like this slate floor like when you walked in. And I remember my dad is like down on his knees and he's like looking in my eyes. And he was like, and he specifically referenced another kid that lived on our street that I was very, very good friends with that was about my same age. And he said, tomorrow, because he told the truth and talked about you, and you were the one that brought the alcohol and the cigarettes, even though they all participated in it, even though they all broke into the house, even though they all drank and smoked, but because he told the truth on you, he's going to get rewarded, and he's going to get some kind of gift out of this. He'll probably get, you know, new hockey costume, new hockey outfit, or, you know, like new rollerblades or roller skates or whatever we used at the time. He said, and that's fine, and that's how his parents are going to deal with it. He said, but you know what? He said, he'll probably never learn a valuable lesson from this experience, or it will take him 5 or 10 times for this to happen. He said, Peter, I love you enough that your mother and I, there's going to be, you know, a punishment from this. And I was like, okay. And he goes, number 1, you're going to go to each of the families in the street and you're going to apologize to them for bringing alcohol and cigarettes to this. And I'm like bawling. I'm like, no, not me. And he's like, no, you're going to go and you're going to apologize to each family member for doing this. Or to each parent. And he said, then you're going to go to the people that are building the house and apologize to them. And he said, and then you're grounded or something like that. I'm not a big believer in groundings, but it was something like that. And he said, I want you to realize, you know, that you have responsibility in this. Like, you know, that what you did affected other people. And he said, because if I don't start teaching you that lesson now, you won't learn it down the road. And he said, and I think it's really valuable that you learn that lesson today, you know. And it wasn't obviously the last mess up in my life. I've made so many mistakes, you know. And the funny thing about this is that I say that in reference to my dad, is that I don't know, I was probably I'd been sober, I was probably 23 or 24, I don't know when it was, and I was talking to my dad, we were sitting on his back patio, and I was asking him for advice on something. My dad is very, very wise and very, very realistic too. Like, I mean, he's not an idealist, you know? And he said, you know, Peter, he goes, I wish I could show you the path that my life has taken. I wish I could show you all the successes that I've had and all the mistakes that I've made. And if I could tell you exactly what to do in each situation, you would have the most amazing, successful life. He said, but you know what? I know that you have to make your own choices in life and you have to learn from it. I can't do that for you. He goes, but as a parent, he goes, I can allow you to you know, go your own way and however it's going to happen for you, and then you can learn from that. You know, he goes, but you have to be open to learning from that. And then he went into this whole thing about how life is a decision tree. Have you guys ever heard about the decision tree? I think I've talked about it on here before. That, you know, you go up on this decision tree, and then let's say it's like, do I go right or do I go left? You go right, okay, on a decision. Then you get to that decision, then there's another decision that branches out, and life is like that, about making decisions. And in each situation that you're in, you're going to make a decision. I could have chosen to say to my friends in that street, no, I'm not going to bring alcohol and cigarettes. I could have never offered it to begin with, but I did. And the lesson that I learned, maybe not then, maybe not 2 years from then, maybe not 10 years down the road, but in looking back on it, the lesson that I learned is that I have a choice to participate in something or not. I don't have to be part of something. If there's something that's going on that I don't want to be a part of, I can remove myself and say, I'm not part of this. Because if I had chosen to say, I'm not part of this at that time, I would never have suffered any, you know, consequences. I wouldn't have gotten in any trouble, all that kind of stuff. And so I have to remember that today. You know, I have to remember that I have a choice in all of that, you know? So that's the lesson that I learned from that. And I still think about those things in my life that I've chosen to, you know, like, learn lessons from. And like, you know, there's so many lessons that I've learned in my life. And I think I say this all the time on my channel, you know, that like, life is like this school. You never really graduate from it. You know, you go from one grade to the next to the next. I am so, so thankful that my parents co-parented together. I can tell you there were many, many times in my life that I did not like it. There were often many times that I did not want them, especially as a child of divorced parents, that I did not want them in the same room because I was afraid that if they talked, they would get their stories together and then they would realize that I was not where I said I was, and then I would really be in trouble, especially more as I got in high school and I started partying and stuff like that. The fact that my parents did co-parent so well and did talk, even with my mother's own alcoholism, which my father was very, very aware of, you know, even though they did, or even though all that was going on, the fact that they did co-parent and they put their differences aside for their love of me, that's huge, okay? So if you're a parent out there that struggles with this, think about your child, because your child is ultimately the one that suffers. I was able to learn so many valuable lessons in my life. You know, I wasn't able to get away with as much stuff as I would have had they not. And I think ultimately my life ended up where I was supposed to. You know, I get so many comments on videos where people are like, your parents did such a great job. You're such a, you know, they did do a great job. And I'm not a perfect human being, not by any means, okay? And I screw up all the time. I just pass on what I've learned. I think everybody should do that, you know? But if my parents did two things really, really right, they A, loved me unconditionally, and B, they co-parented. And they put their differences aside to allow me to see them as still a family unit, even though we were not a family unit. So I knew, like what happened in high school was, if I had like some kind of like punishment at my mom's house, when I went to my dad's house for the weekend, the same punishment was there, you know? If I like lost privileges at my mom's house, I lost the same privileges at my dad's house. And it was fantastic because then, you know, like I knew I couldn't kind of get away with anything. And I'm really thankful for that. At the time, it pissed me off. I was mad. I was like, psh, why did you call? I'd tell my mom, I'd be like, why did you call her, Dad, and tell him? And I never spoke to my dad that way, but I did speak to my mom that way. And I'd say, why did you tell him? And she was like, because that's what we do, Peter, you know? And if you don't like it, change your behaviors. So, you know, I think it's a really valuable lesson, and I would suggest it to any parents out there. You know, love your kids enough to do what's right for them. Love your kids enough to put your differences aside with your ex and learn to co-parent with them. One of the things that I don't understand, I really don't, because of my own personal experiences and experiences of my parents, is when people comment on my videos and they say, me and my ex are great friends and blah, blah, blah. But that also, even though I don't understand it, makes me very, very happy. You know, it makes me really, really happy because your kids are not gonna be affected by that negativity whatsoever. And I think that's fantastic, you know? So, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that are like, so you want me to put beside the feelings that I have towards my ex who did me wrong and did this and did that, and like I'm saying again, not any toxic behavior, but just, you know, things that hurt. You want me to put all that aside to co-parent with this person for the benefit of my kids? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.